Hi everyone, here we are again with an everyday interview. This time we have Gustav, my friend from Denmark.
Salut!
And we're going to talk a bit about money and digital currencies and blockchain and all these wonderful topics. But before we start, Gustav, could you please introduce yourself to people who don't know you yet?
Yes, so as Wim said, my name is Gustav. I'm originally from Denmark, from a quite small city actually in Denmark, 1 hour away from Germany. And I'm now living in Germany, and I've been doing that for 2.5 years. And that's ever since I got down in what we in my industry call the blockchain rabbit hole. And that's also when I began to learn about money in the first place. It was right after I had graduated in university. First, my bachelor was in political science, and my master was more in the business field. And I found out that I really had not learned the basics of economy or the basics of money, even though that my school certificate would say something else. So that's the brief headline. And now I'm very into community currencies, which is a type of currencies that stimulates a specific goal, that we have money that actually stimulates the change we want to see in the world. And I'm also very interested still in the more technical aspects of the whole blockchain scene, which I guess we will talk more about also.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. That immediately triggers a question in me, because every single time when we talk about money, people have an opinion about money. We all have an opinion about money, and 9 out of 10 times the opinion about money is based on actually how much money you have.
Yes.
So it's quite emotional, the relationship to money. If I ask you a question, let me ask you just one question. What is money?
So that's a very good question, Wim. And it turns out, if you ask our governments, our commercial banks, there is actually no really straightforward definition. At least there are many different definitions. I've been looking a lot also in terms of the regulation for those type of virtual currencies, and it's quite hard. My personal opinion now, after I've been really digging into it, is that it is all about trust, basically, money. It's some representation that allow us to put a denomination and a value on resources in the world, such as goods and services and labor. But there are also many different types of money. So providing this very generalized definition of money is not that straightforward. In traditional economy, we have kind of the 3 criteria. We say it has to be a store of value, it has to be a medium of exchange, so that it can enable exchange of goods and services. But money is a big topic, and with good reason, because it, for many people, ruled their lives in this world where, for some reason, we have all those abundant resources, but for most people, there seems to be no money. So it actually is not any longer this medium of exchange to enable transactions. We have actually people who want to engage in community services or exchange of goods and services, but for some reason they cannot because they don't have any money. There's no access to money for most people.
Okay, that's clear. And I wrote a blog of yours. Yes, I read what you
Really?
write. Yeah,
okay.
I try to read it, Gustav. You explained that there are basically 3 ways of creating money.
Yeah.
Well, that's already an eye-opener, because when I would ask anybody, they always think there's one. You wrote, correct me when I'm wrong, the first way is what we call our fiat money, so what we know today, which is actually money creation by banks. We have a second option, which is money creation by governments. And we have a third option, which is money creation by people. That's already a fascinating, those three categories are already fascinating, I think, for most people. When I look at the money creation as we know it now, it's pretty much dominated by the creation of banks in collaboration with governments. When I look at things like digital currencies, complementary currencies, community currencies, we'll get into that one. You're actually talking about a new money creation system. Am I right when I say this?
Yeah, I mean, there were many points to stumble upon on what you said. We now have means with the new blockchain technology to create money perhaps the same way, but perhaps it also adds some transparency and some IT security elements. The whole topic about fiat money itself it's very technical. If you see it fiat on Wikipedia, it would say something along the lines that it's money that are not backed by anything, and this could also be issued between you and me, but it also often have, and that's something like that is how it says on Wikipedia, the backing then of the state. So it often become those national currencies, if you can put them so.
Yeah, because somewhere down the line we left what they call the gold standard.
Yes.
So you have this amount of gold, and then you could have this amount of money, so you know it represents that kind of value.
Yeah.
Which gives the trust.
But if we look at the history of money, we actually started with what I in this blog post, people-powered money, refers to as people money, and that's purely a terminology from Bernard Littera that have written about this. If you see the history of money, the anthropologist David Graeber often is quoted for saying, actually we started with people money. We didn't start with barter. That's the neoliberal economic theory, that first you start with barter, and then we needed some kind of money, so we invented money. What many scientific evidence today are kind of indicating is that we started with small communities where there was trust and credit between people. So you could imagine that you would 1 year build a house for the one family, and the next year the other, everyone in the community would help build a house for another one. So there was this implicit trust unit of account, maybe not a direct value on it, but that's how you actually did exchanges in small groups of trusted people. But you can also imagine what happened then when there came someone from the outside, perhaps with a bit of fur or other stuff that they were actually interested in this community, but you didn't really trust that person. So there you would need something to bridge that trust. And what we've seen then also, most all around the world actually, is that then we needed some kind of natural resource, what we refer to as the commodity type of money. So there we would perhaps accept some gold or some seashell or the like. Then gradually we have went into another epoch of money where that sort of became gold, that became the standard. And even further, a good example is, for example, in the Roman Empire, where they then began to do the gold coins. And even though the gold coins actually had less gold inside them than actually
the trust was there. It's
exactly
this kind of value.
That enabled to make it more convenient to use. So people would actually rather accept a gold coin, let's say that only was 75% gold, than the equivalent amount of gold in raw, because you were maybe too afraid that you couldn't trust that it was actually gold and so forth. And eventually we have entered this paradigm that we are, as you said, very much in now. We can call it a monoculture, which is the type of money that are issued as credit by commercial banks. So that's the same type of credit issuance as we started with, but this time it was only the commercial banks that could actually do that. And that means money is abundant, but only for the few who can really issue it. And what many people state now is that actually 10 years ago it is today that Bitcoin white paper was first published, that we now enter a new area where we can actually have the different types of currencies that are issued peer-to-peer like we started with, but today with the security properties, so you can bridge trust, and you don't need a coin from a king, or you don't need some digit numbers from commercial banks.
Yeah.
No, we can actually bridge that trust without having those big institutions
You don't need
to
a
rely on.
third party to issue that for
Yes.
you. You can just, we create something between you and me and we trust each other. That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's, for example, one type of money, but we can now model different types of currency designs, and that, of course, that's the big conversation that we have not had a lot with the commercial bank of money. What is the type of society we want to live in?
Yeah.
How do we make the planet sustainable?
Yeah.
Okay, when we have the answer to those questions, of course we should have a money system that works for that.
Yeah.
That not only incentivizes with incentives we know from economic theory, where it's only about the money.
And inflation control, etc., etc., etc.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's clear to me. You mentioned something, so we are enabling ourselves to come up with alternative money systems
Yeah.
with a specific purpose, which is something else that's what we know today. Because today, what can you do with money? You get rich and spend it, and that's basically it. You can earn it and you can spend it. So something else comes into new money systems, that you actually can create a currency to reach a certain objective. I know there are a lot of examples around the world where local communities decide to introduce a currency with a specific objective. Is there one you would like to give an example? Is there someone that pops into your mind?
First, I would like to say that we're only now seeing the top of the iceberg in terms of those really well-functioning community currencies. So what we have to do is exactly what you're asking me now, is to say which one do we think are working in one way or another, and why is that?
Yeah.
And a very good example you provided yesterday with the frequent flyer miles. That is sort of
The air miles.
a currency issued between commercial companies, but for the end users. So I will not go so much more into that one. Another one that has been very successful is the Via Bank in Switzerland, and that one started within the two big wars in the Weimar Republic times. So there was the hyperinflation that we see today in Venezuela. Terrible instability of currencies. Not even Bitcoin can match that. It was extremely volatile.
Worse. Yeah.
And what they did there was they said, we have all these shops. It was basically big industry magnets. We have all those different entities. We would like to trade with you. You would like to trade with us. Why can we not have some type of stable media of exchange? So we can actually do that without being afraid that what I receive from you in payment will be the half tomorrow.
Yeah, okay.
So that's one good example of how this actually turned into a small union of
Actually quite old.
56,000 businesses.
Wow.
And it peaked. And also several researchers have shown that throughout the history, this have in those something like 88 years or so, really significantly stabilized the Swiss economy as a whole.
Oh, wow.
And that's important to think about that. That's a layer that you have, so that in times when there are not so many accessible, that's why we call it complementary currencies, when there are not really a lot of accessible money in circulation, then you still need some kind of base layer to actually have the basic economic activity going on. And this is why we call them complementary currencies, because they fill this gap of utilizing unused resources. And that's one example. That's not really going into the incentives or the social currency part of it, but it really shows what is the power and the scale of those type of currencies, as it has really helped Switzerland have such a macroeconomic stability.
I had no idea that it had such an impact on in the early days of finding that stability during that period. You mentioned something that triggered something in me.
Yeah.
It's unmet resources. I know what I've learned so far with complementary currencies is that you need, when you want to introduce a complementary currency, on one side you need an unmet, unused resource.
Yes.
And an unmet need.
Yes.
That's fascinating because suddenly it becomes clear. So you could think of, imagine tomorrow we're going to do a restoration camp because we want to restore the soil of the planet.
Exactly.
The earth is in need of some help here. We want to do that, and on the other side we need people who do that.
Yes.
So if we can balance, the resources we try to, meet, and on the other side try to fulfill a need, you have a balanced way of I think implementing any currency.
Yes.
Or am I too optimistic now?
You really have a good point, and that is finding this balance in this, you could call it circular flow, where you actually have people that have something they want, some have something that they have something to offer, and you also have a bigger agenda of what you want to achieve with it. Mm-hmm. So if we now move into this social type of currencies, very, very similar to what you described here, we have another of the what we can call the best examples to learn from, perhaps from Ghent in Belgium.
In Belgium, huh?
Yeah. And they had a part of the city which had been an industrial area, and they also had quite a lot of immigrants. Which could not really get a job and didn't really have
access to that old school money system.
Exactly, they were really not included and didn't really have the purpose. Perhaps what should one do then? Yeah. So there you have the resources on the one side, which is those strong young men, especially it was young men, and on the other hand you have industrial area, which needs to be actually cultivated, needs to be cleaned up, and there was also, as I understood, some problems with pollution and so forth. And there, with a collaboration with the municipality, well, these young men, when they would work in this space, they would earn up a currency, and what could that money be used for? That's what normal people who don't care about money, they say, it's fine you have this weird currency, but what can I buy for it? Can I buy food or whatever? Sure. So what they could actually get in return was, like in the frequent flyer mile, they could earn up that they could spend this currency to buy land.
Okay.
So they actually, after have worked some time, they got their own colony property.
And that's where the role of the municipality was.
Yes.
So you basically have a triangle.
Yes.
You have the resources, you have the needs, and you have one third party that guarantees when you earn this currency you can do this or that with it. That's
one model. It depends on how idealistic or fanatic you are with decentralization. Do you think that those third parties can be trusted? For example, after the big bankruptcy in Argentina, there was very, very successful mutual credit schemes, also using at that time quite advanced software. But this was before the blockchain time. And basically there was, you can imagine, one or two people who was the administrators, the admins of this software system. And it turned out that those actually were committing fraud. Yeah. And then
you get
over a week, this system that was like really bringing a lot of good economic activity to Argentina in a hard time. It totally crashed. Yeah. So that's some of the things we can also learn from.
Trust is gone and it crashes.
Exactly.
Yeah, you go again. I love the example of Ghent. I heard about it when we were in Switzerland together. And it's fascinating because I myself studied business economics.
Yeah.
and I studied social economics, everything that has to do, there was not one single chapter about the existence of these alternative money systems. Nothing. There was nothing. So I recognize the remark you made in the beginning. You come from school and you think, okay, no, I know it now. And you go into the world and you go, oh, wow, what is happening here? So I think it's wonderful, and it gives clarity to the current system that is basically a monopoly on creation of money. So we do have the alternatives to create new money.
Yes.
And make an agreement on that, how you can spend it and how you can earn it, and do something good for the planet or for the environment or for people or for animals or whatever you like, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an invitation to anybody to think about what do you want to see in the world and what kind of money should we create. So that's a positive message, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay, so we touched the fiat money, we touched the complementary currencies like air miles, flight, and things like that. So you earn something by doing something, and then you can define what you can do with that. We discussed the community currency because it's just terms. There are just terms, but for me, the Ghent example is more a community-like something in my mind. The word is better than complementary. It is a complementary currency, I know, but it's very community-driven.
Yes.
So that puts the right perspective in there. And when I would ask you, okay, so what has that to do with blockchain, Gustav? Why is the whole world talking about blockchain? Because what has that to do with money?
So this
easy question. Gustav.
Yeah. I mean, the talking about community currencies and blockchain, that's a quite new thing that those things are starting to getting combined.
Mm-hmm.
The first reason we have really started to talk about money and blockchain is because of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that's a very different type of currency design, where we basically have something a little bit like digital gold.
Yeah.
It comes with a scarcity.
Yeah.
It's kind of fixed.
Yeah. You need to mine it.
Yes. You need to
just
mine
like
it.
gold.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the big invention here is especially that this is built so that it's hard to stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just one big server in a company or in a bank where you can stop this. Mm-hmm. In essence, you have a number of people who have their computer running at home. Mm-hmm. At least that's how it started. And those computers, they all have the same view on, you can imagine, a big accounting sheet. Mm-hmm. So if two people say some other numbers, but it's not the ones that the 10 other one would have, then they can see there is a problem. Mm-hmm. So this is based on consensus. Mm-hmm. So you have all these different computers which have the same view on a shared database. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so special, because when I want them to send money, one thing is creating the money, which I think we only now begin to understand that it's also a new type of money that we can create. Yeah. The big invention was also that if I now want to send you one Bitcoin, for example, then I can only send once of them. I cannot copy it. I cannot replicate it. Yeah. And this has been a big problem in digital money before blockchain technology, has been what we call the double spending problem. Because how do you know I was not sending the same to another guy at the same time? Yeah. And that's again about the trust in the money, because of course you should not be able to do that. Yeah. So that has kind of been the innovation that happened 10 years ago with blockchain. Okay. And blockchain, with Bitcoin, that started kind of the phenomena of blockchain. So we refer to that as a generation 1 blockchain solution. Okay. Obviously. Okay. A few years later, we have seen blockchain generation 2, especially with this Ethereum blockchain. So there are to put it simple again, if you still think now we have these computers and they have the same view, but instead of only being an accounting book, they have actually the same view on a shared computer. So now you can not only send transactions, but you can put small program in that computer. And that opens up a lot of possibilities because that can also be you here in Everyday Earth who would like to have an community organization. What would you use this for? For example, if you want to do voting, you can do that there now. And it can still not be stopped. And it's fully transparent. So that opens up many further possibilities. And I don't think I need to get too technical, but now we also see the third generation of blockchains arising.
So we are already in the third generation.
I think they're really, really small kids soon. They are not teenagers yet. It's very important for me to say that blockchain have been very, very, very hyped. And I think it's important to remember that blockchains now are very immature. And it's a little bit like back in the days when a normal computer was like a whole house. They are very slow, they are very expensive, some of them are very bad for the environment. So there are actually not too many, from my point of view, really, really other good use cases now. Then we can now create money in other ways and we can send them around and it cannot be stopped. There are many other good ideas, but it's a little bit too early for most people to really...
It's a promise. It's a promise that...
Yes.
It reminds me, as you know, I'm from the old school personal computer days. Immediately you have to think about a floppy disk. You know, we have developed the technology to store data on a medium we can put in and take out and use it somewhere else. That was a revolution, but it was still just a floppy disk. So you could hardly put anything on it, and it took a lot of time and a lot of effort. But we all know what happened. We're running around now with smartphones with I don't know how many gigabytes on it if you want to have them. So it can go fast.
Yes.
It can go fast. Okay, that's clear. And talking about blockchain, I always give the example because I like to keep things simple. That the big difference is here that today, the internet, I can send a piece of information from my computer to your computer, like an email. And the moment I send it, it's in my sandbox and it's your inbox, and it's the same email, so it copies.
Yes.
I think the difference between the blockchain technology is that when I now send it to you, I don't have it anymore.
Yes.
And on top of that, there is a ledger being copied, so I can see that I send it to you and anybody else can see that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct. In principle, yes. There are some blockchains which has another point of view on privacy, so that everyone cannot see it. But in principle, yes.
Okay.
And to make this even more clear, say I will send something to you now, but if I write a small f instead of a big F or do one other mistake, this money is gone.
Okay.
So that's why most people, I think, today are not prepared to do that. You cannot call your credit card company, you cannot call the banks.
So I made a mistake and please fix it. That's not possible.
Many radical people say no, as you said, no third parties, no intermediaries. But I'm not sure yet we're really ready for that. Because it also means no one to help us when we do mistakes. But in principle, as you described it, yes, that's totally correct.
Reminds me of the famous story, I believe Jan told me that story about the guy who had bitcoins on his computer and he threw his computer away and bye bye. Oops, error. Okay, I get it. So it's very secure, but do we need all this security?
Yes.
So there you go.
Exactly. And I was here 10 days ago at the what's called a development conference, the Ethereum DevCon conference. And I think the good news is that we are beginning to be very honest about that a user experience like that is most probably not acceptable for most people. It's too hard. It's bad user experience. The technology is not accessible. So we are really focusing on these problems and finding clever ways to solve it actually. But like the internet, there needs to be standards arising that we can build on top on. And the standards are still very, very early here. So that's why for me it's very interesting, because we can kind of model it and see what we want to do. But there's a good reason why it's not used by everyday people.
I understand, and I do have full confidence in our ability to develop a technology that is very stable and reliable. Because I also remember that in the early days of the personal computers, we suddenly invented a thing called token ring, which today is the basis of any communication. But in those days it was like, oh wow, so there are tokens and it goes in a ring back and forth, and it checks if things have been sent and received. So the process became stable, and I think we need kind of token ring in blockchain development, which is probably not the right word, but it's the same philosophy, because it builds trust. Nothing gets lost.
Yes.
Okay. You just mentioned that you were on DEF CON.
Yes.
In Prague?
In Prague, yeah.
Okay. Why were you on DEF CON in Prague?
So this is the big convention for Ethereum and for the Ethereum community. And this was what I referred to as this second generation blockchain, the one with the virtual computer, the Ethereum virtual computer. And that's simply where we get together one time a year. For that's at least the biggest of the gatherings, and this one there was more than 3,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And it's not cheap to enter, so it's really dedicated people.
Okay.
And it's basically very, very research oriented. It's to find out what should be a good standard for if you lose your password. It's called a private key, but lose your password. How could we do that? Maybe if you had sent a link to your mother and to your brother and to your friends, and you told them you would like to have it back, then 2 of those 3 could maybe give it back to you.
Okay.
So we have to meet in person. We work online all the year, but we also have to meet in person and really discuss what are the good standards, what are the problems, learn from each other. So it's mainly a knowledge exchange and social gathering of this young community. But Ethereum is very, very big. There are several million people now that are actually engaged activists in this community. But it's mostly online, and it's places on the internet that most people don't perhaps stumble upon.
Yeah, okay, wow. And I know you are involved in a company called Trustlines.
It's a project, from the BrainBot company. But, yes.
Could you please tell us, what is Trustlines about?
So Trustline is an agreement between 2 people. You and me, we could say, I will give you an amount of credit, and you will give me an amount of credit. And we can choose to do so in any type of currency we would like. This could, for example, be in this community, we want to give 5 hours to help the community to plant trees. And if we have this Trustline agreement, and you have one with another person, then those trust lines becomes connected. So we can all issue money between people, only 2 people that trust each other. Can also be between businesses, organizations, or maybe between a community. And you can make a payment
in the network,
in those trust lines.
So I trust you, and you trust Janne trusts Petar, and so on and so on and so on. So that the network is growing by itself based on relationships.
So that's our way to go back to how money actually was. That it is this trust.
Because
issue between people. But how can we bridge the trust? Well, you make a payment through the connection of trust lines, and so that's the basic idea. Then we have developed many more things around it. The question is, for example, which way should it take in the network? That's a very complicated
technical challenge.
I mean, it's more maybe a moral challenge or ethical challenge, because what we have designed here is that this way of creating money, actually, this is how only commercial banks today create money. They have such a network. They have trust lines with each other.
Yeah, they issue credit, and that's how money gets into the system.
So that's how they create money. But the way they destroy money in the commercial banking system, that's very different because we have a financial crisis and overnight, let's say that happened in 2008, suddenly we find out all these subprime loans, all this debt, all these salami slices of debt into a financial product, into another financial product, which in the books look like a lot of money. Suddenly this vanishes. And overnight you have maybe 30% less money in circulation. So we try to make that the payment goes through the network of trust lines, so that imagine we have been out eating and I paid for you this time, but you've been out with another guy and he's been paying for you. So if you can take away that evens this out, we destroy money in the system incrementally. So we will not have this big drop in money.
I understand.
That's, for example, one part of it. Another big part, which I think could be relevant for you, is customization of networks. What are the values we want to have? And this, every network, let's say we want to do a network here in Nice, we would say, now we create a smart contract. That's the thing on the blockchain. This is the current, every currency network has their own smart contract. And this means that you can put in many of the mechanics that you would desire. Would you think it would be a good idea to have interest? Would you think that it would be a better idea to have negative interest? So we have a demurrage. Would you think it would be good that you could actually make a payment to another community with another coin, so we can do cross-currency payments?
And you can define that in a so-called smart contract.
That's parameters that we assume that the currency network organizers, the people on the ground, the people that are actually going to benefit from this, hopefully from this currency, not someone far away, but they can come together as a community and they can decide, have the big conversation. What type of society we do want to have? All right, when we know that, then let's design the money that fits into this vision, so that it works for that vision, it works for the people, that they would like to actually see of change in their community.
So you can actually copy a model like in Ghent, where they introduced that specific community complementary currency, saying, okay, we have people, we have something to do in our city because we want to, get the place fixed. We have a third party that accepts, payment by doing so. In the real world, and now we can put an agreement like that, because it's basically an agreement. You can put that in a smart contract. On a community level.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. So that's what you are building, Gustav.
That's what we've been building at Trust Lines. Yes.
Oh wow! When is it finished, Gustav?
So
when can we use it?
It's free. It's open source, and what I've described now is ready.
Oh wow!
It's ready. We have built a mobile app. That's the only thing that is not yet open to the public, but it will be soon. It will be open, so everyone can basically say, I would like to have this app, but I would like to maybe have my own name of it. There we really hope to make this white label solution, so everyone can also have the free app if they want to give it their own logo or their own colors. Then
for our viewers, a white label. What's a white label?
It just means it's a free software. It doesn't have to be free always, but in our case it is, where you can basically put some colors on it. You can choose how it will be. It's called white label because it's what's a good analogy? Like you can choose the color, you can choose the name, and so forth. It's built so that a business can choose to have their own color, or that if you want to have a little bit extra function in there, you can also do that. So that's like a software term.
Okay. Now I'm familiar with the term white label. I know not everybody is.
No.
So that gives the opportunity for like a community who has an own identity in terms of a logo and a house style and the tone of voice, to apply that on the white label version of your Trust Lines. So
do you, for example, want all the currencies from the other communities to also show up? Or for example, in the Ghent example, this is a closed
economy. Connections with other.
That's the question. In the Ghent example, that's a closed economy. There you would not really benefit from it. And again, if you think that you can have the perfect currency That's not going to happen, because if you want to have them connected to all other communities or the economy as a whole, then it also means if that part of the economy is going to crash, then your currency is also going to crash. And then you can ask yourself, what is then the difference? So that's the difference between having a very effective currency or having a more resilient currency.
And it actually empowers you to even think about it.
Yes.
And I think that's already, wow, that's already enormous.
Yes.
Okay, and once you defined the conditions and the agreement as in being a smart contract,
yes.
Can you change them?
Yes, you can actually. You can do that. But if you create a contract and you say this one should not be changed, then you cannot change it. Then it's what's called permissionless, and you cannot do anything about it. If you choose to have upgradability, what you can do is that you can, and now it becomes a bit technical, but there you can do a governance hook, it's called. So you say, in this contract we're just doing now, we talked about, how can this one make decision? How can it be changed? Well, maybe based on the other contract, which is maybe, let's say it's the community board of Nice here, for example, or just an example. And
third party.
And this contract, how can this make decisions? Well, let's say we have done 10 votes, which are also a type of cryptocurrency. We have given that to 10 people here in Nice, and they can make a direct democracy vote.
When we agree in a smart contract that these 10 nodes or 10 people in this network say, yes, we're going to make this change, we all accept that they are allowed to make the change and apply it directly.
Exactly. So there,
it's quite democratic.
Yeah, it definitely can be. It definitely can be. And that's why, whether that's okay, some people say no, it has to be totally decentralized and unstoppable. But I think that it should fit the reality of the community. And there we already do trust a lot of people with a lot of stuff. So why should we now? Many people have said that blockchain or Bitcoin is like trustless. I don't think that's true at all. Unless you can sit down and you can understand everything and in the code, then maybe it's trustless. But no one can really do that with these systems. So I have to be honest, and I trust very, very smart people that can understand parts of it. So what is the difference then to the banking system? Well, if you wanted to see the banking transactions today, if you wanted to see the banking software, if you wanted to see any parts of it, that's closed. No one knows what's going on. But here, at least everyone has the possibility to look into it, whether they can understand it or not.
Because all the transactions are transparent.
Yes. The source code of the software and as well as the transactions. That's transparent, at least in many blockchain systems. That's
a big difference in comparison with the world we are now, because we have no idea.
Yes.
And if you want to know, we can't even get in.
No.
Okay, that's clear.
And they have all the power, and they make 97% of the money in circulation. So that's a lot of trust to very few people.
Absolutely. I would like to ask Jana, who's here. Are there any questions from people who view this live stream, Jana, we need to address?
Not really. We have actually one question, which is about the white label. Maybe we could sort of further clarify it.
Sure.
We have one question from Diana in the United States about it. And I think it is also to explain, you could explain it like a company creating something, a product, leaving the product blank, give it to another company or sell it to another company, and they put their logo, their colors and everything on it and sell it like it's theirs.
It was it has been used in the personal computer industry to keep on repeating that example a lot. There was a moment we had consumer personal computers with the IBM brand on it, which were actually made by Acer. So we researched and developed in IBM, and Acer did the production under a white label agreement, and we bought them back from them under the IBM brand, and they also sold them on other brands in the marketplace. Because the IBM brand had a different price, and we also had a different layer of services around this particular machine. So white labeling is being done in the cosmetic industry. It's being done. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
If you go to McDonald's, most places in the world,
Yeah.
that's a white label app you're using. Maybe it's called McDonald's,
Yeah.
maybe it has their logo, their color,
Yeah.
but actually it's just a white label, which is it's this more generalized payment app, and then you want to have a payment system. Here you go.
Yeah.
Call it what you want. Put your brand colors into
Yeah.
it. That's maybe the more understandable
So you
version.
provide a solution which can be used as a white label, and a community or anybody who wants to can put their brand in there and everything to create the identity, which is also, I think, very important when you talk about trust.
Yes, definitely.
When you trust a community, it's important.
And
We have another question
Okay.
from Linda from the Netherlands,
All right.
and she asks, so is it a kind of sharing economy, I suppose?
Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Linda. Well, I think that, correct me when I'm wrong.
I'm not sure what the sharing economy means.
Voilà. When I look at the sharing
explain it,
economy, I see that people come up with examples like Airbnb, which is the most famous one. But when I look at the blockchain world, it's completely different, because Airbnb is one of the most centralized structures I've ever seen. It's all Airbnb, so it's basically centralized with a lot of people connected to it, but it all goes to one server and one owner, and there is one contract, and nobody else decides what's in Airbnb in terms of possibilities to set your terms than Airbnb. And when we talk about this world, it's absolutely the other way around, because now you are in charge to set the agreement, the terms, and things like that.
Yes, actually, Bela from this, he says it shares intellectual property. So in this case, maybe if you're talking about software, etc., it's basically sharing intellectual property.
I think I get that one. Bela.
And I think where we're coming from, we have talked a lot about those questions the last days, and it's very about what is the logical fundament, and the so-called sharing economy seems to be kind of old wine on new bottles. It's the new capitalism. It's still competition culture, and when you have explained me about the care economy, this is much about totally different, about collaboration, not about having this masculine dominance competitor culture.
When we put it in the perspective of a care economy, we need to develop business models that actually work for all. So in the Airbnb example, or in the Uber example, or whatever you want to call them, you have this centralized system that actually enables other people to put up their, services, but they decide when you can do it, how you can do it, etc., etc. Even Uber dictates prices.
Yes.
It's very, very centralized. I think a care economy is about enabling structures that brings a definition in there that actually works for everybody on the same level.
Yes.
And that's in that perspective, it's completely different than the so-called sharing economy.
And another topic, if we bring in the blockchain aspect that I'm representing here today also, is that there is actually a cryptocurrency version of Airbnb.
Oh, really?
So people can put up the listing and they can accept cryptocurrencies.
All right.
So what is, okay, fair enough, but what is the difference then to the real Airbnb? The difference is especially that you own your data and you own your account. So you can always switch to another service. That's just another website.
So
but the history you have done so many good transactions with other people. You have been a good guest, or you have not been messy, or when you are the host, perhaps you are good. That's a lot of social collateral you have built up, and this everyone can see. And if someone now, like Airbnb today, wants to charge 10 or 15% just for providing a website, then you can say no. This guy, he's charging 1%. I will go to him and I can take all my history with that.
What's the name of this startup? Do you know that?
Oh, I'm not sure. If you Google crypto Airbnb, I'm sure you can.
We'll
try.
ask Janne to Google it and share the link in the comments, because I think that's fascinating when you look at these two worlds together and you see all these new things are rising. You know.
It is a very, very hip hop style name. It's called Crypto Crips.
Crypto Crips.
Crypto
Yeah.
Crips.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes.
So Linda, go book Crypto Crips.
Travel the globe, pay crypto. I will share the link.
I had some friends trying it a few weeks ago, and it worked. I was a little bit suspicious myself. You never know, but it worked for them in Berlin. So
Yeah, well, the best way to find out is just to test it. You know, you can. I think that's wonderful. I don't know. I think we are. Is there anything else you would like to share with us now you are here?
Yeah, I would like to maybe share another example of a community currency,
Please
which
do.
actually I think is a really pioneer.
Okay.
I met them 2 weeks ago in United Nations in Geneva,
Okay.
and I could really see the topic now. Also with their example, is really something that even the United Nations brings up a lot of interest.
Tell us.
So this is a community in. That's how it started, at least, a community in Kenya, in the capital Nairobi. And this it's really, really the hardest slum area called Bangla. And this started as a physical currency, especially by a guy called Will Rudick from an organization called Grassroots Economics. You can just hear the name, it's an amazing name. And in the beginning, they had physical notes there, and they actually went to jail in the beginning. By the central bank thought that they were kind of
Fraud.
going into their territory. But they
wow.
found out that this was in the interest of the community. And what they did was, and that's just a good learning experience again, they first went to the small network of businesses. And they said, do you have some goods and services that you would actually like to sell more of? Everyone said yes, because it's very, very hard to have access to money in those slum areas. At least it's very going up and down a lot. Yeah. So they got together and they created this small network where they started using this physical type of money.
Okay.
What they did in addition is said we also want to have a small community tax to it. Because the goal they had was that they wanted to provide 1 extra meal a day for the poorest people in the neighborhood. That was the end goal. And this community tax was canalized into like this small pool for the community.
Okay.
And people who didn't have any job.
So that's the smart contract.
No, this is how it started physically, offline. Yes,
version of
exactly.
it. Yeah.
But now they have actually switched to blockchain. So that's why it's a really, really interesting example.
Wow.
But what they did already back then was then that the people who would then do community services, and that was, for example, collect trash in the street or other really thing that was really needed, they would then get paid in those currencies so that they could buy the food in the local stores. Because for most people, again, it's about what can I use this money for?
Yeah.
And this has enabled, and there are also a really good research paper from the United Nations around that and tremendous increase in just the economic activity, and also as the goal was 1 extra meal per day for several thousand people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and how long has this been going on?
I think it started for 5-6 years ago, and now they are in 5 different places in Kenya.
All right.
And they have now, as I said, switched to a blockchain, which is a kind of private version of Ethereum. Because, as I said, most blockchains are not really ready yet.
Yeah.
So they are not so fanatic about decentralization, and also that also means that you don't have to pay so much for the transaction fees. That's another technical description, but if you would have to pay a lot in fees, that would not make sense anyways.
No, I understand.
And this is very interesting to see now how they have a small pilot using this technology
In Kenya.
in Kenya.
So in Kenya, they're already doing it. They're successful in it, and now
Yes,
they're
they
making the switch to blockchain.
And as we also perhaps know, Kenya is also a pioneer in this what's called the M-Pesa, which is this analog phones, so that via SMS you can pay your electricity bill or so forth. They are really jumping the whole industrial revolution, combining technologies in some ways.
They're in the fast lane now. Huh?
And this is the innovation also on the blockchain. That's a nerd for me that find that interesting. That you can now do blockchain transactions in this local currency via an SMS
It's amazing.
for free because they are paying the transactions.
Blockchain transactions in an SMS.
So that's something that really makes sense to me. That then
Well, it gives access.
yes,
We discussed access in the beginning.
Exactly.
It can be very hard to get access to all these complex built systems that are highly centrally organized. And I think all these grassroots projects prove that there is a different way.
yes.
So,
And in this example, the trust is not just between the individuals, as we talked about with trust lines before, but this is a traditional,
Yeah,
what's called multilateral
yeah.
mutual credit system. It's hard words, but it basically means that it's between the community and you. So it doesn't mean if you go out of funds and so forth. The trust is between a small community group.
Yeah, and you actually take care of each other because you have this central tax
Yes,
that makes sure that everybody is
exactly.
goes to a higher level and not just winner takes it all.
So this enables actually civil society to, it's also called grassroots, but from bottom up, from the grassroots, to actually create the structures that they want to see, but that perhaps based on complex international politics, geopolitics, and corruption doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
But this allows the individuals and the communities to make the structures in the communities that they want to see. So that's why it's very fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating, Gustav. Thank you so much for sharing this. I
Welcome.
believe we have no more questions to answer, at least not for now. And otherwise, anybody can leave a comment and we will get back to you. Thank you for being here, Gustav.
Thanks for inviting me, Wim. It's a pleasure.